I want you to imagine with me for a moment. Imagine you have a disability. It makes your life difficult, and you're judged by society for it every day of the week, even though you had no choice in the matter. Now, imagine we lived in a world where you could get surgery or a prosthetic that would get rid of this disability. Would you make that choice, or choose to stay with the body you have? It seems like the answer would be easy, right? Well, for today's episode, we're going to explore that question, because the answer might not be as simple as it first appears. In her book, The Bioethics of Enhancement, Transhumanism, Disability, and Biopolitics, Melinda C. Hall argues against human enhancement as the way forward for people with disabilities. Hall goes after a particular school of thought on human enhancement, transhumanism. Transhumanism is the broad belief that with enough bioenhancement and modification, humans will one day be able to transcend their bodily limitations, or perhaps even their bodies entirely. While transhumanism in the popular sphere is currently championed by people like Ray Kurzweil and tech mogul Elon Musk, Hall instead targets the most influential academic transhumanist philosophers, such as Julian Savulescu. Savulescu's transhumanism, and transhumanism as a philosophical movement in general, Hall argues, is primarily concerned with one thing: disability. More specifically, disability as biological risk, and the primary purpose of bioenhancement as the eradication of this risk. On the surface, this seems fine. I'm sure the basic idea of let's use science and technology to get rid of disabilities so that disabled people don't have a worse quality of life than able-bodied persons strikes most of us as a noble goal. As a disabled person myself, I can see the appeal of the idea. But Hall argues that the motivating force behind the transhumanist lofty rhetoric has a much darker role to play. Deciding what bodies matter, or in plainer terms, who gets to live in the post-human society the transhumanists are crafting. Savulescu and the other transhumanists, including the so-called bioconservatives, are more alike in their underlying assumptions than different, despite how the two camps are framed in the academic literature. The shared assumption between them is that the complex social and political forces that shape the question, what bodies matter or who gets to live, can be reduced to questions of biology. This biological reductionism, Hall argues, disregards the bodies of persons who don't fit the typical, read, white, male, and able-bodied bodily norm in society, and the nuanced social and political forces that shape our bodily realities. That's not a good thing. Not only does this way of thinking lead to what Hall dubs the new eugenics, but it also stands to eradicate the validity of disabled bodies and their experience of life. An example Hall cites is a lesbian deaf couple who actively chose a deaf sperm donor so that their child would be deaf as well. When the couple faced massive backlash and controversy from able-bodied people who saw the disability as a negative amid concerns for the child's quality of life, they responded that deafness was just as much a linguistic culture or a way of life as it was a disability. Savulescu's idea of procreative beneficence, which is basically the argument that parents have a moral responsibility to use emerging genetic technologies and bioenhancement in order to provide their hypothetical child with the best or most open future possible, would entail that while the deaf couple's decision wouldn't be seen as harming their future child per se, there would still need to be an explanation or justification for why the disabled child is allowed to exist in the age of bioenhancement. If that strikes you as weird and worrying, you're not alone. Hall argues that Savulescu's focus on eliminating undesirable traits biologically obscures the ways in which disability involves a lack of fit to or lack of responsiveness in a particular social world, which is malleable and socially constructed by way of stigma. Since a large part of identifying disabled persons socially is done via the usage of stigmatizing labels, e.g. referring to an amputee as the amputee, for instance, the worry is that by utilizing rhetoric that refers to disabled people as defective or requiring an explanation for why you have a disabled child makes disability even more stigmatized in society than it already is. So, if bioenhancement is not the way forward for increasing disabled persons' quality of life, what is the answer? Hall argues that the burden is on society. Not only do we as a society need to become more tolerant of the existence of disabled bodies and persons, but we also need to work at a policy level to make changes that will increase their quality of life and end the stigma and invalidation of disabled bodies. In short, we need to change the way disability is socially constructed. Now, while as a disabled person I am broadly in agreement with this view, and the worrying background assumptions of bioenhancement via disability give me the proverbial heebie-jeebies, I have to lightly disagree with Hall's conclusion. While we could indeed stand to be more tolerant of disabled persons and bodies in society, I disagree that bioenhancement is not a way forward for improving the quality of life of disabled persons. Granted, some disabled persons, such as the deaf lesbian couple who wanted to have a deaf child, might not want to take the option of bioenhancement. But what about disabilities that lead to a severe impact on quality of life, such as muscular dystrophy, or cerebral palsy, or epilepsy? For these types of cases, I think even the most benevolent and tolerant society that allows for maximum policy and social change isn't going to do much to improve the quality of life for a disabled person from the disabled person's own perspective. The person with muscular dystrophy is still going to face a reduced quality of life no matter how progressive the social policies that shape their disability and bodily realities are, and this is a flat-out biological fact. As someone who has to contend with the biological reality of a disability every day of the week, social policies, even at their most benevolent, don't strike me as enough of a solution. I'm not denying the dark assumptions of the transhumanist perspective, but I'm not in agreement with Hall either. My view is something more in line with that of Clare Chambers, who in her book, Intact, A Defense of the Unmodified Body, argues that people have a right to choose bodily modification if they so desire, while noting that the pressure to choose that route is also socially constructed by bodily norms and distortions taken as the norm in society. Especially with regards to disability, I am in agreement with Hall. We have a long way to go before disability is socially or politically accepted as a valid way of living. But when it comes to the question of bioenhancement, even noting the problematic social norms the transhumanists are advocating for by proxy, I feel that the burden is not on society entirely. In an ideal world, the choice to eradicate or mitigate a disability that is causing a disabled person to have a lower quality of life, again, from their own perspective, should be the choice of the disabled individual in question. If you're disabled and you don't think bioenhancement is the way to go, that's fine. You're free to make that choice and live your valid life as a disabled person. On the other hand, if you're disabled and think that bioenhancement will improve your quality of life, then you should likewise be free to make that choice equally free of social stigma, judgment, or coercion from others. Of course, the problem here is that we don't live in an ideal world. And this is why I agree with Hall on the need to investigate and reevaluate the social and political construction of disability. The truth, I think, is somewhere in the middle. If we could reach a transhumanist society where the bodily norm is not white, male, and able-bodied, and also have a society that is more tolerant towards the realities of disability in general, we'd turn from asking the worrying question, who gets to live, and instead ask the much more important, how do I want to live? If nothing else, this is just food for thought. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time.